Welcome back everyone. This is Mindy here today with another Lawn Fawn video for you. And in today's video, we are going to be making a double slider surprise interactive card featuring this really cute picnic scene. To save a little time, I did go ahead and pre-stamp all of the images that I'll be using. So I stamped them on Lawn Fawn's white cardstock using their jet black ink because it's Copic friendly. And the stamp sets I'm using is Crazy Antics, so most of the images off of this stamp set. I'm using Happy Village, so I used the trees and the sun and cloud, and then Unicorn Picnic, I picked off some of the food items on there. Now I did speed through a lot of the coloring because there is quite a bit of it, and I wanted to really focus on the interactive portion. But I will have all of the colors listed at the top of the screen if you're interested in the colors that I'm using. For the mice, I have E47, E44, E43, and E42, and I'm coloring them where the shadow is on the left-hand side of that particular mouse that I just did. It's facing towards the right, so my shadow area is going to be on the other side. Now for this mouse that I'm doing, it is facing to the left, so I'm making my shadow area on the right-hand side of the mouse. So just adding in those colors and then blending out so that the front of it, or its face, is the lightest area. I'm going to come into the ears with an R05 and an R02 just to add a little bit of pink. And then for the belly, I'm doing E13, E11, and E00. You don't need to have 3 colors there. That's just more of a habit that I have of using 2 or 3 colors. You could certainly get away with just one of the colors. As I'm coloring, I'll kind of talk about why I came to the decision of using some of the images that I did. I love almost everything in this Crazy Antics stamp set. The only thing I didn't use, I think, are the little ants that are just blacked out. I wanted something to color, so I think those are the only images I didn't use. But when I was thinking of things and planning out my scene, I needed to have some more food items in my basket, and I wanted the ants to be carrying food away. So that's when I kind of just went through. I actually just started looking through the newest release, and the Unicorn Picnic was a perfect stamp set because it has donuts in there. That's one of the first things I grabbed. It had some cake. There's a sundae. I don't think I used the cake, but it had a lot of food items that were great for tucking into my picnic basket or to have my ants walking off with. So each ant off on the side of my card when I pull out the double slider is going to be carrying a piece of food. So I wanted to make sure I had plenty. If I have extra, that's okay. I just tuck them back into my stamp pockets and save them for a future card if I ever need to add just a little bit of something to it. And Happy Village is definitely a staple in my sets when it comes to picking images, because those trees are just the perfect trees to use in any cards that I make. So that's usually always sitting in the front of my stamp baskets, is that Happy Village to stamp out trees. And a good idea, I think I've said previously, is to just stamp a ton of them out. You know, sit in front of the TV, color them up. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then you can either die cut them at a later time or just set them off on the side so they're ready. They're always great to add to your backgrounds if you just want to add a little imagery to something and you feel it's a little too plain. So the trees are always just a great item to have, or the clouds. Now, as I'm coloring the food items, these are going to be the only things that I don't have colors listed for at the top of the screen. A lot of them I'm just randomly grabbing from my stash that's sitting on my desk, or colors that I've already used in my card. So you can see I'm really kind of sporadic when I'm coloring the items. I don't just stick to one. I have a brown in my hand. What else can I color brown? Or like the pink, what else could I color pink? I just get it all done and over with. And you can see I'm not doing any shading really to these food items. I'm just adding straight color to them. I thought about shading the ice cream cone, but really they're so small and the ants are going to be carrying them that I didn't think it needed any shadow images or shadowing to it. For my tree trunks, I'm going to color them first in an E33, which is going to be my lightest color here. And when I go in to do shading for the tree trunks, I'm literally just going to add a straight line of E37. I'm not going to blend it out. I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just picking one side of the tree and adding a little bit of that shadow to it. And for the tree tops, I'm going to use YG67, YG17, and YG13. I color a couple of them on screen here, and then the rest I'm going to do off screen. And then my last piece to color up is going to be that little sun and cloud. And for the sun, I'm doing Y38, Y19, and Y15. And I think I just brought in like a BG, a really light BG color, I believe, for my cloud. I just really added some light coloring to it. Once those are all done, I will line up the coordinating dies to all of them, hold them in place with some low tack tape, run it through my die cut machine, and then I like to put them in a little bowl or a little basket and set them off on the side while I work on the rest of the card. These are all the pieces I cut using the double slider surprise, and I die cut them all out of Lawn Fawn's white cardstock. So I have the two side panels, the two pieces to make the pocket, and then the track piece. I'm going to start with one of these pieces for the pocket by folding that flap over with that scored line that's already in there, and then just reinforcing that fold with a bone folder. This is going to be the first piece that I'm going to work on. I masked off the bottom portion of this front panel with some blue tape, but I really didn't need to mask that off. After a while, it didn't really matter after I made the card. So now I'm just taking some little pieces of that blue painter's tape and I'm tucking it behind my panel. So the sticky side is facing up. It's going to hold my stencil down to my cardstock. I don't need to put any spray or anything on here because this is just some really quick ink blending that I'm going to do. So I'm starting off with a blending brush and I'm going to use the freshly cut grass inks or ink pad from Lawn Fawn. So starting at the top, and I'm going to blend my way down, I'm going to have two hills here for my scene. And I want the front one to be the lightest, but I do still want it to look a little dimensional. So I'm adding this quick layer of that light colored ink to it. The top portion is the one I want to make sure I have good coverage on. Then I'm going to come in with jalapeno ink. So I'm starting up from the bottom, blending up towards the top, but I'm not going to go all the way up to the top of my hill. I'm going to keep kind of a little line of light color there, so that's kind of my highlight area for my hill, just to give that a little bit of dimension. Then I can carefully peel back my stencil. I'm going to wipe it off so that it's nice and clean. And then I'm going to flip it. And this is going to give me my hill in the background, which I want to make a darker color. So my painter's tape is still holding that in place. And then I'm going to take some Post-it tape and just rip it into some strips, and I'm going to mask off this hill because I don't want to ink blend on top of that. I want to keep that color that I just did. So I'm just masking that off, and I'm going to come in then with the jalapeno ink, which is the last ink I used. So I'm just going to come in with that blending brush, quickly add some color in there, just to kind of have that base layer, making sure that the top of that hill is fully covered. And then once that is on there, I'm going to come in with Noble Fur, which is a really nice dark ink. And I'm blending that from the bottom of that masked area up. And once again, making sure I leave kind of a highlight area at the top, so not blending all the way to the top. I really love the color variation of these greens in the Lawn Fawn inks. Then I'll remove my Post-it tape and the Hillside stencil, and I'll just clean that off. And now I'm going to come in and add some clouds. So I'll use the cloud stencil and the kiddie pool ink, which is a perfect ink for a light layer of clouds. So taking that blender brush, I'm going to go ahead and add some clouds to the top here. And then I love the cloud stencil because you can flip it, turn it, rotate it, whatever you want to do to add another layer of clouds. Once I have those blended on, I'll carefully peel back that blue tape. And that is the front panel of my interactive card. Now to do the side panels, I'm lining up my first side panel about where it would be in my pocket. Notice I don't have it pulled out all the way because not all of it is going to show when it comes to doing the interactive portion. So I lined up my Hillside stencil kind of eyeballing about where that hill would continue, and then repeating the exact same process I did on the front panel using the same colors. So this is the freshly cut grass, and then coming in with jalapeno. Now these hills don't have to line up perfectly, and when I open up my card, I mean, it comes pretty close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And especially if you're adding anything to your scene, it'll probably cover it up. But I was trying to get as close as I can, and the trick to doing that is lining those panels up like I had showed in the beginning, about where it would pull out and about where it would be centered in that pocket that we're going to end up creating. So here's my second hill where I started with the jalapeno, and then I'll come in with that noble fir to add that darker hill to the background. And I'm adding clouds to this as well, but there really wasn't a lot of room from my hill to the top of the panel, so I end up only using one cloud that you'll see here in just a minute. So there's my finished hillside, and I love that first hill. It looks like it's almost glowing, so it's so perfect because it's like the light is hitting it at the top of it. Really happy with how that turned out. So here is the kiddie pool ink and a blending brush. You can use any blending tool that you feel comfortable with. I just find it a lot easier to do this with a blending brush. And see, I tried to fit one more cloud in there and it just didn't work. But off camera, I did go ahead and do the other side. Now we can start preparing our track. So this is the piece we haven't touched yet. I'm adding the Lawn Fawn double-sided tape to the very top and the very bottom of the track on the one side, flip it over, and add that to the top and bottom on the other side. So we have adhesive on both sides of these tracks, top and bottom. Then I'm also adding it to the two flaps. So that was our front panel, and then this is our back panel. Then I didn't fold that one over yet, so I'm just going to crease it along that fold that's already there, and then reinforcing that fold with my bone folder. So here's a look at how our scene is coming along. So I'm really happy with how this is coming out. I was really happy with where the hills were lining up. And now I'm going to start decorating my panels. So I figured out which panel is going on the left and which is on the right. I added the trees down already with liquid glue. I started lining up my ants with the food and then remembered I wanted to add these little ant tracks. So I just lined them up on a clear block and I'm stamping them down. I believe I'm using here, this is a VersaFine black ink. It just happened to be the closest one to my hand when I was stamping, but the jet black ink would work as well too. So I'm stamping them on both sides of my panels. So both of these are going to be very balanced. I'm going to have the same amount of ants and same amount of food, and it just helps balance the card out. And then I can finish adding my food and my ants just using some liquid glue. And off screen, I do the other side as well. And like I said, it's balanced, so it's going to have, just depends where you want your food, what you want the ants to be holding. It's all on preference. So then here's a look at my two completed side panels. Notice I did not go all the way to the edge. Those are going to get covered up when we pull them out. So I wanted to make sure all of my critters were showing. Now I'm taking my front panel and I need to stamp my sentiment on here before I go gluing it to anything. So I'm using the sentiment from the Crazy Antics stamp set. I lined that up with the help of my Misty Corners tool, and I'm stamping the word picnic in chili pepper ink. That's going to match my picnic blanket since I didn't have a lot of red in here. And then I'm adding in the other two smaller sentiments, which are going to be staggered off on the sides. And I just stamped that in the jet black ink. Now for our track, I have a piece cut down to 2 1/4 inches wide. This is actually a shopping bag. In Kelly's video, she uses poop bags, but you can also use any type of other shopping bag. And I added a piece of the double-sided tape to one end. I'm wrapping that around my track, and then I'm going to peel up the backing of that double-sided tape. And when you're doing this, you don't want this too tight or too loose. So I'm going to pick up the one end and just loosely lay it on top of that double-sided tape and then push down to make sure that's adhered there really well. This is going to be what moves our two panels. Then I'm just going to trim off that excess and just kind of move that along a little bit. Make sure that it is moving along and it's not too tight. And then I have the seam on the very far left edge side, and I'm going to add a piece of that double-sided tape to that end. Once I have that added, I'm going to flip this over and add it to the other side on the other end. So they're opposite ends on each side. So I'm going to flip it back over. This is my front. My score tape is on the left-hand side. I'm going to remove the backing from that, and I'm going to add my first panel. So the panel I'm adding is going to be pulling to the right. So I took that, lined up that right edge, carefully laid it down on top of that double-sided tape, and then just pushed it down to make sure it was adhered together really well. And now for my other panel, this is going to go behind. So I kind of lined up how it was going to face. I want to make sure it's facing the right direction. Peeled off the backing of that double-sided tape, and now we're adhering this face down. So I'm lining up my edge, attaching that to that double-sided tape, and then you'll see I'll flip it over, and when you pull it out, so one is in front and one is in back. Now I pulled it out and pushed it back in just to make sure that it wasn't too loose or too tight. Everything works smoothly. And before I do any scene building on the front, I need to take this tab piece and die cut out those notches so that you can pull out those side panels. So after I did that to both of those pieces, I'm going to remove the backing on one of those flaps, butt that up right next to that flat edge, and then just fold that over. So we're making a little pocket, and this is what our mechanism or our track is going to fit into. Then I'm taking my track, I'm moving those side panels out a little bit, and I'm going to remove the backing of the double-sided tape on the back side of this track piece. So once I remove those, I'm going to line this up in my pocket. So just making sure I have that kind of facing in the right direction. I'm going to nudge that up right into that fold area. Then I can push that down so it's secured really well inside that pocket. Make sure it closes really good. And then once I kind of make sure it's still lined up and moves, I'm going to remove the backing of the double-sided tape that's on the top of my track. I'm also going to remove the backing of it from that flap on the top, and then I can seal this all together. So just like a little pocket. And everything is still moving really well, and I can work on decorating my scene. There are also little pieces that you can die cut from that double slider surprise that puts little tabs that you can attach to your side panels that come out. I really didn't want to put those on top of my scene, so I left those out, and I have the notches on that center panel, so I feel like that would be enough. That's totally optional though, and up to you if you want to add them or not. So now I'm working on just putting the entire scene together, and I'm using a mix of liquid glue and double-sided tape. The double-sided tape or the tape runner, I bring out when it's bigger pieces. And right there, my favorite is that ant that's holding up the picnic basket. I think he looks so cute, and it's just so funny to see him like Mighty Mouse is what it reminds me of. We are in the home stretch of finishing off my card. So I'm starting off with a piece of mermaid cardstock that I had trimmed down. I added foam squares to the back of my interactive piece. That's just going to kind of pop it up a little easier to get the fingers in there to pull out our side panels. I'm adding this using some tape runner, adding this to a piece of white cardstock. I wanted to have a little bit of a border to kind of pop that up, and I do have it cut out of one of the stitched rectangle dies, and then adding that on top of a piece of cardstock that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 that I used from the Hello Sunshine pack. So that is my finished card. I haven't made one of these in a long time, so I was really excited to put this together. I love how the scene came out. The hills worked so great. I love the new stencils. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you haven't played with the double slider surprise recently or at all, I hope you give it a try because it's a ton of fun. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.